Like, they're horrible stories, man. They're really bad stories because it's all fun when it's going up. When it's going down and you actually lose money that you can't afford to lose, that's when I get really pissed off because they lied to them with movie stars, athletes, with the most famous people they could find. And then, some of these folks are going to lose their money and you can't tell me it's their fault. Like, I understand there's degrees and whatever, but like, you ask folks in crypto, and I've been going around asking them, like, what do they, because they always talk about the people that made money. And I say, well, what about the people that got scammed? What about the people that got defrauded? You know what their answer is? Every single time their answer is they should have done more research.
Well, I mean, that's certainly, I think, like the pernicious part about making, like even the big two cryptos, like Ethereum and Bitcoin, like making them totally analogous to money. I will say that like my stance on NFTs is not really changed. I think that they both represent like a sort of embarrassing 1970s type midpoint in an undeveloped technology that will maybe one day represent a horrible new reality for like digital rights ownership, but the technology just isn't there yet. My stance on cryptocurrencies themselves, though, has softened a little. Just in the past year, I did a fundraiser for like these Palestinian related charities, and I had to work really hard to find things that like weren't on some sanction list that could at least have a PayPal account, that could at least have a bank a bank that would accept wires from America, because it's already incredibly difficult. And we thankfully raised a lot of money, and for a few charities it was pretty easy getting it to them. Like, it's usually a wire or a physical check. But for the one group that was in Palestine itself, it was one of the most time consuming things I've done for something that should be incredibly easy. In the time that I was trying to get them their part of the money, they had 3 PayPal accounts seized for having the word fucking Palestine in it. They had to shift around bank accounts because they like weren't allowed to accept wires from America, just because the financial system is so stacked up against not even enemies of America, but like, if you're not on our side, you're just kind of cut out. You're just kind of fucked and you're cut out. Um, and the reason that I say my stance softened is like, I don't really think of cryptocurrencies as a currency really, but just as like an unfortunately super volatile value store.
Right.
If I had okay, like say that the
No,
amount was
this all makes sense to me.
right, the
Yeah.
amount was like $40,000. Say I
Right.
bought like, it would probably be like at the time like 90% of a Bitcoin, right?
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, here you guys go. And if they could have immediately cashed it out, which the problem is, I mean, the problem is turning it into real money. You still have to rely on the same like shitty financial system. But the idea of cryptocurrency itself, I don't think is a bad idea. And in retrospect, I would have maybe tried that, but then of course, yeah, you have the same problem. They eventually have to turn it into real money, and that 90% of a Bitcoin that you gave somebody in like fucking June of 2021, that could go from being worth like $40,000 to being worth like 22,000 right now.
Right.
So it's you would all the things that make crypto fun for people, including the supposedly like most stable, highest market cap ones, are the exact things that make it kind of like unreliable as an actual currency or just a value store.
That's right. And I mean, I think you're making a great point. And the one thing crypto does do well is point that our system sucks.
Yeah.
It's pretty good at the criticism part, right? Or at least some of the criticism. Some of the criticisms actually don't totally track, but the notion that we need to reform, the legacy banking system needs to be reformed, that we need to figure out a way to do some sort of censorship resistant privacy, have some privacy elements and censorship resistance in our currency. Those are really interesting ideas, and ideas that Jacob and I have been talking to a lot of, people we're having fun talking to, economists and professors of law and the like. There aren't a lot of easy answers. I mean, I think that's the hard part, right? Is like what crypto's done is like to use sort of your example of basically trying to take something of value and transmit it overseas to a place that has trouble accepting things of value so that they can get the thing that they really need, right? Like we hear about some people in Afghanistan using Tether possibly, or being sent Tether, the stable coin that's used a lot. because the banking system has been such a disaster over there. Um, to do that is has its benefits. I think the downside is that you are, like you said, the value fluctuates wildly, and there's no. It's sort of working because it's outside the law right now, right?
Yeah.
But the goal should not be to just create things that are outside the law, which also allow criminals to use them for all. Because if you can send it over, then obviously, it's being used for a ton of money laundering. It's being used, obviously, ransomware. I mean, ransomware is such a great example because, it's really funny to hear like, oh yeah, just that the ransomware problem, that's a problem with hacking. It's like, hacking's been around for a pretty long time, and it's probably a lot easier to hack than most people think it is. It's the problem you get is you need to get that, you hack into the government database or the colonial pipeline. You need millions and millions and millions of dollars of ransomware, right? Like you want to get money. But how you get money immediately in millions of dollars? You could meet somebody in a Home Depot parking lot with bags full of cash, but you're probably going to get arrested. And they track, for every time they track down Colonial Pipeline, there's a million other, ones that get away with it. So ransomware really flourished because of cryptocurrency would be my argument. And there's a lot of other things that are flourishing, tax evasion, capital flight, sanctions evasion, things like that. There are sometimes pluses and minuses. Sometimes there are pluses, like maybe we want to avoid some government policy that was, it's terrible. But like I'm sympathetic to that argument, and we're trying to talk to those people. But it's really hard for me to separate that from what's happening in this country. In this country, in terms of most people, they're gambling on something that they think has value, or investing, I guess you should say with quotes, in something they think has value, but economically it doesn't. And so when it crashes, which I believe it will, those people are going to be screwed. So, you know, anyway, that's a clunky way of answering your question, I guess.
Ben, I'm curious, like as you've sort of become more of a prominent critic of crypto and like NFT and this whole new universe, like I'm interested in like the people you've encountered, the arguments you've encountered by its most fervent believers. Like there's sort of a utopian ideology connected with this. Like like we were talking about, like this idea. This is a new form of money. This is a form of money free from government control. I mean, like there are the obvious sort of like troll responses about like you're a no coiner or like have fun being poor or whatever. But like like what like I'm interested in more of like the in the defenders of this, like not just the people who are making like millions of dollars on it, but like in just sort of like the scenarios, or just like the freedom that they imagine that this will provide like all of humanity. Like I mean, like what
Yeah,
are some of those arguments, and like how do you respond to them?
sure. So we went down to the Bitcoin conference in Miami, which is the biggest conference in the world, I guess, in terms of comes to Bitcoin. And we walked around the floor, and I interviewed people, and people have booths set up, and I interviewed regular folks just attending. You realize quickly that it's not monolithic. One of the things that I find sort of endlessly fascinating about money is that it's not real. Money is a social construct, just like government or religion. It requires a critical mass to believe in it for it to function. And so you see this critical, because and when it fails, when all of a sudden people start to not believe in the government, and then if enough people don't believe in it, then the governments can collapse, and the currencies often collapse right along with them, as well as the economy. Um, this is sort of the other side, right? It's like all of these promises that cryptocurrency will do all of these wonderful things for each of these individual people. And so they have their individual things they're fascinated by. It's everything from, I talked to one guy who's a former Occupy Wall Street guy who he's an artist, and now he paints these really elaborate paintings of like a it's like a group of men seated around a table who are supposed to represent the bankers of the world. They are pretty Jewish, um, and there's a big Bitcoin sign in the back, and it's like we're taking down the system. And we had a long conversation on camera, recorded all this about no, it's not. He's not anti-Semitic. This is the way that and you're into some interesting territory, right? There's people like that. There's also the first booth I walked into at Miami was so it's on the outside, so it's like the less expensive booth. So it was panties for Bitcoin. It's a father son team. They've started a panty company that you can only buy panties in Bitcoin because I don't know. I think the dad worked in the panty business or in the undergarments business, and so he just knew how to probably get them cheap from China or something. So they're selling you, panties for Bitcoin. So there's a range, right? There's like people who are like just it's like a trade show on one side. It's like a get rich quick scheme on another for many people. If you look at the polling, if you believe the polling, industry polling, then most people got into cryptocurrency in the last year in 2021, and most people got into it as speculation, as a way of making money.